The Denver Broncos will have to trim their roster to 53 players next week. We played GM, and we did just that in our 53-man roster prediction here on today's episode, Locked on Broncos.
You are Locked on Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
Broncos Country, what's happening? Welcome into another episode of Locked on Broncos, your favorite, your daily Denver Broncos podcast here on the Locked on Podcast Network, where you know it's your team every day. That's it. You never miss out on what's going on with your team. We bring you all your Broncos news, content, coverage, analysis in one place. I'm Cody Roark, Broncos reporter for Mile High Sports, joined as always by Sayre Bedinger, site expert over there, predominantlyorange.com. If you're not yet an everydayer, Broncos Country, become one. Hit that subscribe or that follow button wherever you get your podcast. We appreciate you so much for making us your first listen, however you choose to do just that. But we got a lot to break down here on today's episode of the show. We're predicting our 53-man roster predictions after week 2 of the NFL preseason. We'll go through the offensive side of the ball. How many players will Denver carry on offense? How many will they carry on defense? What other decisions could make this a little bit difficult next week when George Paton, Sean Payton actually have to do it? You'll get all that here on today's episode of the show, which is brought to you by our friends over there at the Game Time app. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Sayre, look, man, this is always a fun exercise of trying to predict the 53-man roster, but it's always hard to get from 90 to 53 because it's a numbers game. You have to analyze your strengths, your weaknesses, and what you need overall. We do not envy the Broncos' decision to do this, but we like taking our own shot at predicting the 53-man roster. You and I did our own individual ones. I'm very curious to see where we're similar and where we're different.
Absolutely. And one of the biggest differences that we can tease to everybody listening is that I ended up with 52 guys and you ended up with 53. And we're going to find out exactly how we arrived at that. But yeah, it is a really tough offseason for the Broncos in that regard, which is exactly what you want. You want tough roster decisions. And I've never gotten all 53 right. So for anybody that's listening out there, I've never betted 100% on a 53-man roster prediction because something is always bound to be different from our perception or from where we're sitting and we're seeing things on the field. The team is evaluating things from not just this year, but future years. So just keeping that in mind, Broncos Country, that we're making our most educated guesses possible here, although it's probably easier to get an NCAA tournament bracket right than it is to get a 53-man roster right these days. But starting with the quarterback position, Cody, I think you and we both agree on this. I'm keeping 2 quarterbacks on the roster this year as opposed to 3 that we saw last year when Zach Wilson was around. I just don't feel like Sam Ehlinger is the same exact type of guy like you're talking about at the quarterback position with Zach Wilson, who was a former 2nd overall pick. So I feel like you can sneak Sam onto the practice squad, and that's why I'm taking 2 guys here at QB. What do you say?
Yeah, no, same line of thinking. It's going to be Bo Nix and Jarrett Stidham. I agree with you on the premise of getting Ehlinger on the practice squad because you don't need 3 QBs on your active game day roster. I mean, we know that there was those situations in San Francisco where the 49ers, they went through their starter, their backup, and then they had to go wildcat there. The rarity of that occurring in today's game is interesting. But now, obviously, with like the rules where you can bring up a QB from the practice squad as your 3rd guy and it not count against like your active game day roster, perfectly fine. I think that's exactly where the Broncos and Sean are going to go. There's no debate, no controversy there. I feel like this will probably be the one where things are a little interesting here. Running back, Sayre, transitioning there. I've got them keeping 4. I've got them going with J.K. Dobbins, R.J. Harvey, Jaleel McLaughlin, and Tyler Bidet. I got them keeping 4. And those 2 guys on the back end make up those final spots there, which means that no Blake Watson, no Audric Estime in terms of the active 53-man roster. Where are you at, like, in terms of the number of running backs on your 53-man projection? And are the guys the same as mine, or do you have something different?
I have the exact same 4 guys on my roster prediction, Cody. And I feel like the one player that I could see is if the team really believes in the projection for Audric Estime, then you keep him over Jaleel McLaughlin, who I think Tyler Bidet has outplayed him dating back to early last season when they've gotten their opportunities. I think that's just the way that I see it, Cody. And that's what I would do if I was the Broncos. I'd be keeping Bidet if I was only keeping 3. But I think Sean Payton loves Jaleel McLaughlin. And I think Audric Estime is very clearly in the doghouse. We see the 49ers only have 1 healthy running back. A number of other teams are kind of panic signing guys at running back. I would I would hope that if the Broncos are going to move on from Estime, that they find a place to trade him and get some value here, because he does have 3 years left on a rookie deal. And I don't think he would come back onto the practice squad if he did even clear waivers. I do think a lot of teams have Blake Watson's, though. I think the Broncos would be able to sneak him through, although, I mean, that might be a bit of a, coin flip. So might be looking at the Broncos adding a practice squad back from elsewhere if they lose both of those guys. But so you and I are same running back. I think wide receiver, you and I are probably both in agreement as well. 6 guys on this roster, unless something surprising happens with Devon Vele.
Yeah, no, I've got them keeping 6 just as a safeguard here, and it is the room that we've talked about dating back to really mandatory minicamp. Cortland Sutton, Marvin Mims, Pat Bryant, Troy Franklin, Devon Vele, and obviously Trent Sherfield Sr. because of special teams there. Really, I think Vele's kind of that wild card where we don't know. Like, could be traded, could be just, a guy that Sean Payton says, hey, he's very important to what we're doing. I went with the safe bet of going with 6 there. So I think you and I are in agreement there. And yeah, I mean, do you have anyone making it over Trent Sherfield, or is Trent your 6th guy?
Trent's the 6th guy. I think he's proven in this preseason that he's going to be an asset to this team, both offensively and on special teams. And the former is actually a bit of a surprise, isn't it?
Yeah, no, it is. It is a little bit, but I mean, he's been fantastic. You've seen him grow, not only just play that special teams role effectively, but man, he's doing things downfield as a blocker. He's being a decoy, running defensive backs off. I did a film review from the Cardinals game. I came away so impressed with this wide receiver room and Pat and Troy and Trent Sherfield specifically against the Cardinals here. But let's go to tight end, fullback, right? Kind of like combining all these guys together, knowing what we know about Nate Adkins, the injuries there. Evan Ingram, Adam Troutman. I got Lucas Kroll making the roster, and then Adam Prentice as that fullback. So really 4 between 3 tight ends and 1 fullback. Where are you at here?
Yeah, so I've got Evan Ingram, Adam Troutman, and Caleb Lohner making the team, Cody. I'm going to stand by what I said earlier in the offseason, which is that the Broncos spent a draft pick on Caleb Lohner because they believe in the long-term potential. I think they're not going to mess around with subjecting him to waivers, things like that. So I think Lucas Kroll, ultimately, I don't know if he did enough to make the roster this year. I'd be interested to know what the team thinks. I know you've been out there at practice watching him, so I'm not opposed to that. I think tight end is one position, though, where I would say the Broncos could look to potentially bring somebody in, and we'll talk about that later on today's show. But I think with Adam Prentice coming in as the fullback, he would become that 53rd guy for me if I was adding a 53rd player. But I do believe the Broncos could kind of manipulate things, keep an open spot. If they've got some players on waivers that they like, you could put Adam Prentice onto your practice squad, shuffle him up while Nate Adkins, who I'm placing on my, hypothetical injured reserve, right? Nate Adkins will go on short-term IR and he'll come back later on down the line, but you shuffle up a guy like Prentice off the practice squad instead of using a 53 on him. That's just how I would play it, but I don't know if that's how the Broncos will do it. So this is the first time you and I are really going off from each other here.
Yeah, no, and I'm curious to see how it plays out, because this is one of those positions where 1 or 2 moves could be off, and it could make the difference in, maybe another position getting an additional guy there. Let's go to the offensive line here. Center, I've got them keeping 2, Luke Wattenberg, Alex Forsyth. I feel like there's no need really for them to keep a 3rd guy there. Are you in agreement with that one? And then we'll get to guard.
Yeah, 100%. I'm in agreement with you. I've got 9 O-linemen total on mine, which I was kind of surprised by. I didn't think I would have that many, especially after Nick Gargiulo went down. So I have 9 guys.
I've got 9 guys as well. So let's go to guard. Obviously, Ben Powers, Quinn Miners make up your starters there. I've got them keeping 1 backup guard there, and that's Calvin Throckmorton. I think because of his versatility, he could play a couple of spots there. If need be, can play right guard, can play left guard. So I think Will Sherman gets brought back onto the practice squad. I liked what I saw from him against the Cardinals. And then I've got them keeping 4 tackles, where these 2 back-end guys, Alex Palczewski and Matt Parrott, behind McGlinchey and Garrett, these guys can play guard as well. So that kind of factors into that positional versatility, and that equates to 9 total offensive linemen here. So, Sayre, you and I, we didn't really differ much here on the offensive side of the ball. I've got them keeping 25 total players on offense. We know there's going to be 3 special teams guys, Will Lutz, Jeremy Crawshaw, and Mitchell Fraboni. That kind of makes out, there's 28 players, which leaves 25 spots available. Where do we differ when it comes to the defensive side of the ball here? Broncos Country, Sayre and I are going to share who we have making the Broncos roster on defense, including a short amount of quarterbacks compared to years prior. We'll go through that and much more here on today's episode. Locked on Broncos.
Today's episode of Locked On Broncos is brought to you by FanDuel. August 26th is officially FanDuel Futures Day, a brand new holiday for football fans who live for bold predictions and preseason hunches. For just 24 hours, FanDuel is giving you deals on NFL season predictions. So whether you're calling your MVP, eyeing a long shot division winner, or ready to crown your Super Bowl champ before week one even kicks off, this is your moment.
One of my favorite things to do before the season even begins is I like to put together a parlay of who I think is going to win the division, every division across the league there for a chance at a big payout there. But on top of that, you can also crown your champion here. If you think that the Eagles are going to repeat in the Super Bowl, you think the Chiefs are going to make it back, or you think the Broncos are going to be a dark horse there, FanDuel allows you to get in on the action. Visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your futures bets now, because Futures Day is one day and one day only. FanDuel, play your game.
Cody and I didn't have too many disagreements on the offensive side of the ball as we build out our 53-man roster, but defensively, we'll see if we're on the same page here, Broncos Country, as we continue to fill out what looks like one of the deepest rosters in the entire NFL. So stay tuned so you don't miss a single moment of this, because we're going to tell you, we're looking into the crystal ball right now, what's going to happen here in the next 10 or so days. But appreciate all of you so much also for listening to Locked On Broncos every single day. If you haven't yet already done so, man, hit subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, as well as over on YouTube. We're continuing to grow the community, and we're so grateful that you're all part of it. Cody, one housekeeping note on the offense. I had Frank Crum instead of Calvin Throckmorton, but that's the only other difference that we had. Besides you having 25 offensive guys and I left a spot open at 24, you and I both have 25 defensive guys here. Let's start in the trenches with the big boys. This is where the Broncos are arguably at their deepest, is on the defensive front. And this is where maybe a lot of the most difficult decisions will end up being made.
Yeah, I mean, you figure out your starters are very solidified. Malcolm Roach, is that key guy that's going to come in right behind DJ Jones. But what does the back end depth look like there? I've actually got them keeping, I kind of walked it back because I think last week I said I could see them keeping 7 defensive linemen here. I actually have them keeping 6 total, right? You've got Zach Allen, JFM at defensive end. You've got Jordan Jackson, Savion Jones, who are kind of backing those guys up there. And then at D tackle, I've got DJ Jones and Malcolm Roach kind of rounding out my 6 guys. Do you have 6 or do you have 7? And what does your order look like there in the trenches?
I'm surprised. We have the exact same 6 guys. I really thought about, I thought about Inyoma Uwazurike, but I also feel like, man, he could probably sneak to the practice squad, based on what we've seen. Same with Jordan Miller. I feel like you want to buy into the flashes in the preseason, but you also have to remember that they're evaluating the whole, if you put it in like a pie chart terms, they're evaluating everything. And so one preseason standout game doesn't necessarily mean everything, but I guess you never know what they've also showed, that we don't know as well. So I wanted to consider Jordan Miller after his game on Saturday. I definitely considered Inyoma Uwazurike, but ultimately, man, running it back with the top 5 guys from last year plus Savion Jones in there, that was tough to pass on. How about at edge? I think this one's a pretty straightforward one, right? I mean, you and I'd say both keeping 5 guys, right? This has got to be the easiest one on the team.
I mean, I like 5 guys, the food here, but the Broncos like 5 guys here at outside linebacker: Jonathan Cooper, Nick Benito, Jonah Ellis, who's had a tremendous offseason and preseason campaign, Dondre Tillman, and then, of course, Q Robinson, who I liked a lot of what we saw from him. It'd be hard for them to not keep this group here. I feel like this was probably the easiest one to kind of pinpoint on the defensive side of the ball.
Absolutely. The top 5 is very clear. You had a top undrafted free agent off the edge who's already been placed on injury reserve, so that's not even part of the equation at this point. And yes, I think the Broncos, once they drafted Q Robinson, man, you could have pretty much set in stone the 53-man roster, 5 edge guys right there. Inside linebacker, I struggle with this one, Cody, because I kept 4 guys.
Same.
Dre Greenlaw, Alex Singleton, Justin Strnad, and Lavelle Bailey. Those are the guys that I kept.
Yep.
Do you feel like there's a legitimate chance they would keep 5? Because it would require them to cut somebody elsewhere.
Yeah, when I was trying to formulate this, I was struggling. I was like, do I keep 5 inside linebackers, knowing just like the injury stuff there, where it's like, all right, well, if you bring a couple of these guys like Jordan Turner, Corene Reed, like 2 guys who I think are going to be prime, return to the practice squad immediately type of players, it's like, all right, well, if you run into an issue, the flexibility is you can promote these guys from the practice squad to the game day roster and it not affect what you do from a roster making standpoint there. So Jordan Turner, Corene Reed, these guys I have making the practice squad. So I felt safe with that in mind, going with the 4 inside linebackers with Sternad and Lavelle Bailey being those key backups to Alex Singleton and to Dre Greenlaw, who right now will, I imagine that both Singleton and Greenlaw will play a few snaps against the Saints on Saturday in the preseason finale. But it was tough. I was having a hard time trying to figure out, should I go 4? Should I go 5? Knowing what we know about the injuries there. Obviously, I imagine short-term IR on the table here for Drew Sanders as well. Had to factor that into the equation. This one is probably a tough one to kind of go through here.
Yeah, it is. I thought about Drew Sanders as well. I don't know exactly when the timeline is going to line up for him to come back. I think ideally you would like to not have him missing 4 games guaranteed. That's what injured reserve will do. I think he's a legitimate cut candidate, Cody. I really do. I think the lack of availability over 3 straight years, it's tough. And part of that is on the team because they tried to switch him positions, added a bunch of weight. I think they still believe in him. I think he could be cut or maybe traded, but I say the safe bet is short-term IR. He misses a guaranteed 4 games, and then we reevaluate ahead of week 5.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what they decide to do with him because, yeah, I mean, the best ability is availability. He hasn't been on the field. It's a challenge. And, there's got to be the sense of reliability is, hey, this guy's dealt with, several big injuries back to back years at this point. What does it look like for him? Even if he gets, let's say he released, could he be brought back onto the practice squad at some point?
Yeah.
I don't know. Broncos Country, make sure you let us know your thoughts here on inside linebacker. This one is probably one of the tougher ones to do. I feel like the safety position was a lot easier than I thought it was going to be. Sayre, I've got them keeping 5 guys here. Once again, we're going to 5 guys theme. Talanoa Hufanga, Brandon Jones, PJ Locke, JL Skinner, Devin Key. I think with those back end 3 guys, the final 3 guys that I mentioned there, those 3 are going to be core 4 special teams guys. Whereas Hufanga and Jones, those guys are going to play defensively, and those other guys are going to rotate in certain packages. I kind of really like the Broncos safety group here in terms of security in the event of an injury. I think Denver's actually in a good spot at this position with these guys. Where did you land on the safety position, and what were the names there?
I kept the same 5 guys, and I think that the question would be, Delarian Turner-Yell, Sam Franklin Jr. You already have 3 guys at a minimum who play a lot of special teams for you. I mean, PJ Locke, very good at special teams. And then, of course, Devin Key and JL Skinner. That's where we've primarily seen them for the Broncos. So I don't know that you need to necessarily keep Delarian Turner-Yell and Sam Franklin Jr. for that particular reason, unless they beat out one of the guys that we already mentioned, which I don't know that would be the case. I think that it's kind of a solidified group there. Corner, I was surprised too, Cody. I only kept 5 guys at corner, and a lot of times you will see NFL teams keep 6 or 7. I mean, it's just a shortage around the NFL of quality cornerbacks. Teams, as I've been putting together a few 2026 mock drafts, Cody, because I'm a psycho, and that's my job, to be a psycho about the NFL draft. But so many teams have horrible starting cornerbacks right now. I can't even fathom it. I mean, just imagine not having 5 guys who could start for you. That's where I think the Broncos, they'll draw the line. I think Damari Mathis is the guy that he's going to be off this roster, and the Broncos would save over $3 million against the salary cap by cutting him or trading him, which I don't know that he has much trade value anymore, Cody, if he had any at all.
I don't know. And I also feel like the Jets, perspective wise, feel like that, they're struggling. Some guys get banged up there, and I feel like they're looking to add corner depth as well. I mean, that's why they signed Mario Goodrich after the Broncos had released him initially a few weeks ago. I've got them keeping 5 as well. And what I like about this, like, you can make the argument that this top 5 in terms of the Broncos cornerback depth might be the best in the NFL across the board there in terms of strength. Pat Surtain, Riley Moss, obviously, as you know that. Jaquan McMillan, Jahdae Barron, Chris Abrams-Drain. On paper, that looks like the best group of 5 cornerbacks you can have on the depth chart here. And it's not necessarily one of those things where it's like, all right, we need to keep a certain number of guys here because of the injuries last season. We saw what happened after Riley went down. I think it's like, all right, if Riley goes down, we think that Chris Abrams-Drain can step up and play. And we know that Jahdae and Jaquan, they could play outside too if need be. So it gives them that versatility to say, hey, we're good with just 5 guys here at corner. And dang, what a good group of 5 guys it is.
It really is. I mean, it's quality depth, quality starters, it's everything. And for anybody that's thinking that the Broncos would trade somebody from this group, I don't see it. I thought about it, and as I was putting together this 53-man projection, I don't think you want to mess with that, considering your top 2 guys went down at one point or another last year, right? I mean, Pat Surtain had the concussion against the Chargers. Riley had the injury later in the season that was really costly for the team. And even when you have depth, you don't always just trade from your depth unless you have a young guy that you believe can step into a spot and a specific role. And I just think the depth the Broncos have at corner right now, those guys are practice squad types. It's just not good timing for a trade right now. I think you keep the 5 guys that you have and you allow that depth to be a strength of yours on your roster this season.
Well, Sayre and I, we have shared our 53-man rosters offensively, defensively, but we're also going to debate as well where there's room where the Broncos can maybe add or replace a few guys because of special teams value or depth additions from other teams. We'll debate and discuss that here on today's episode, Locked On Broncos.
Today's episode of Locked On Broncos is brought to you by Game Time. Have you ever decided at the last minute to head to a ball game with friends or family? Maybe it's game day and you suddenly realize that you want to be in the stands. That's exactly where Game Time comes in. It's the easiest way to grab last minute tickets without the stress. And with the money that you save on tickets, you can then splurge on food, drinks, merch, or even invite a bigger group to come with you. Game Time makes it possible. Game Time makes buying tickets fast and simple. Prices on the app, they actually drop the closer that you get to first pitch, and they've got incredible last minute deals, clear seat views, and a lowest price guarantee that takes the worry out of buying.
Well, if you're like me and you get tired of the endless scrolling trying to find the best deals, Game Time, they take care of that because Game Time zone deals pick the best seats in your section for you and giving you the overall best value there. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. When the Broncos have to formulate their 53-man roster next week, what potential moves could they make from other teams who are going to go through roster cuts? That's one area Sean Payton has always highlighted as something that they pay attention to is other teams' rosters, just as there's probably going to be a handful of teams that pay attention to who the Broncos cut next week when they have to trim it from 90 to 53. Thanks once again to all the everydayers out there. Thanks for tuning in, making us your first listen, however you choose to do so here. Sayre, this is always a fun thing to look at here. I know obviously we gave our predictions for the 53-man roster offensively, defensively, your 3 special teams guys in terms of punter, kicker, long snapper here. But where are some positions or some names up for debate here for the Broncos that maybe they could look from the waiver wire from some other teams, guys that they've scouted here in the preseason process, or maybe even bring in guys back essentially?
Well, I think that we're going to see the Broncos taking a look at the tight end position, Cody. I just do. I mean, maybe they feel more strongly about guys like Lucas Kroll, Caden Prieskorn, and even Caleb Lohner. I mean, I think I took a risk by putting him on this 53-man roster. We got Nate Adkins, who's going to be out for an extended period of time after having the repairs done on his ankle. I think that tight end is a non-negotiable area. I was bummed that the Broncos didn't go after, especially seeing what he signed for, Noah Fant, who took a backup role to Mike Gesicki in Cincinnati. I mean, they have to add at the tight end position. I don't know what they're going to do because there's not like an overabundance of guys, right? But there could be some guys maybe in trades like the Packers. They have Luke Musgrave. I don't know what his situation is or how much it would cost to get him. Luke Schoonmaker from the Cowboys, a former second rounder who I think he's kind of been a bust for them, that the Broncos, I think, liked that tight end class, and they just didn't end up getting the guy that they wanted. So I would be interested to find out if there's a potential value trade there for this team to explore at tight end, because the free agent group, I mean, it's bad enough that the Dolphins are calling like Darren Waller out of retirement. So I don't think there's necessarily many free agents out there that could really help you, but I do think that this is a position number 1 on my list where the Broncos need non-negotiable, proven better depth.
Is this the one position that you're the most uncomfortable about with the depth of this team right now, or is there another position specifically?
This is the number one most uncomfortable, because I think the Broncos are one Evan Ingram injury away from utter
Ooh.
disaster at tight end. I mean, that's where we're at. Caleb Lohner is so raw, and Lucas Krull just has not been consistent enough for me. I think personally, this would be the number one on my list, circled in red. Like, we have to get somebody here to help.
What did you think of Lohner's game this past Saturday? Because I mean, from my perspective, watching in the press box and then going back and watching the game, I would like him to stay on his blocks a little longer. It still seems like he's trying to work out his refinement as a route runner. That's still very much a work in progress. But in my opinion, I feel like it's too much to justify right now a 53-man roster spot. But then again, it all goes back to, if the Broncos visionary are saying, hey, we're comfortable with Evan Ingram and Adam Troutman being our top two guys, we're going to live with that. And taking that risk of saying, like, if there's an injury that pops up, okay, Adam Troutman, you're back to being the number one guy. To me, I still feel like the potential there for Lohner is certainly there, right? Are we going to see it his rookie season? I don't think that's going to be the case, but maybe he is a guy, if he does get cut and gets brought back to the practice squad, maybe he can take this year to develop. And then maybe next year, maybe see a little bit of an increase. It's a dart throw. We go back to that, and it's an exciting one. It certainly is an exciting name to talk about. I just feel like his first two actual games in the NFL have kind of been a little underwhelming.
Yeah, 100%. We've seen everything that is concerning about, like, why he's raw. We've seen that in the preseason, and we have yet to see what makes him special. Like, that's the thing, that we haven't gotten the chance to see that in a game setting, that ability to dominate at the catch point or dominate in the red zone. We just haven't gotten the chance to see that. Now, I know in practices he's caught some touchdowns and he's caught some passes and things like that. So again, you evaluate on the whole, but when you're seeing everything that becomes a concern about a raw player, that he can't stay on blocks, he's committing pre-snap penalties, he's clearly behind everybody else in terms of just understanding of football overall, which we knew coming in, those elements were to be expected if, or I guess it would have been much more easy to stomach if he was making the plays in the passing game, which we did not get to see at all in the preseason. And you and I called for more tight end involvement in the second game of the preseason. Did not really get that other than the Evan Ingram play. I know we saw a couple of catches here and there from guys, but it's just getting tougher and tougher to see where the Broncos are going to have this depth that you need in an 18-week regular season at a position where, man, it's crucial to have these guys, and you're already down Nate Adkins.
Caden Prescorn has grown on me quite a bit. I'd say just combine the last 2 weeks of practice from him and also the last two preseason games, felt like he's been terrific. I mean, even playing that fullback role to kind of start that game against the Cardinals, kind of what we had talked about in our players to watch preview show initially surrounding him. But then it's just, okay, he can play inline. He can play as that kind of move around fullback, wing, hybrid type of player. And of course, yes, he had the play where he was going to extend it for the end zone and it just punched out. I mean, just that stinks. He was so down after that, but you want to be able to look at the whole body work. Yes, that's a negative play, but man, I came away impressed with Prescorn. He's kind of risen up a little bit, because I feel like initially when he signed, I think you and I talked about it. It's like, I just have a hard time seeing him being anything other than a camp body. Happy to eat crow here. I feel like he's done a lot. He's looked more polished than Caleb Lohner at this point. Granted, Prescorn has more, historic college production, more tight end experience of actually playing in a lot of games as compared to a guy like Lohner. So that's where I think you weigh the pros and cons here. Maybe the Broncos stumbled into, okay, they drafted Caleb Lohner, but maybe Prescorn is going to bring something to the table that, like, hey, we might have gotten lucky with finding this guy. I don't know. But I'm with you. I'm curious to see how Broncos Country feels about the tight end position, where they feel they're the most uncomfortable with the team's depth, with Evan Ingram really being added on R53. Shocker, he made the team. They kind of really have 7 wide receivers, essentially, right? 6 with the guys we kept, and then Evan Ingram with his versatile skill set. So he's kind of like this jack of all trades. As Sean Payton would say, he's the Joker. But is there a defensive position where you're worried about? I mean, I know we talked about inside linebacker a little bit, but I think with the guys that we project to be on the practice squad, I feel like you can make up for those concerns a little bit at off-ball linebacker.
Yeah, 100%. It would be difficult to see where the Broncos would cut somebody else to bring in another linebacker from another team. Like last year, it was Christian Welch, right? And I know that they had to, like, I had an open spot on my 53. It's not for a linebacker necessarily, but I think if they were that concerned about having a fifth guy, having that extra depth with two guys at the top of your depth chart who have been hurt this offseason, you've been bringing them along really slowly. I just think they probably feel good enough about both Justin Sternad and Lavelle Bailey stepping into the starting lineup, even if both of those guys had to start for extended periods of time. I think they feel good enough about those guys that they would be willing to say, hey, we've got a good enough top four here that we don't need to bring in somebody else who's going to play special teams. Like if they need somebody at linebacker to play special teams, you're right. Bring up Karene Reed for a couple of games. Bring up Jordan Turner? Yeah, Jordan Turner for a couple of games off the practice squad. You don't need to sign somebody to your 53 when you have needs elsewhere.
Well, this is obviously unrealistic, but let's just play a fun hypothetical game just for the fun of it. Let's say Jeremy Crawshaw, let's say that international exemption actually counted in the regular season. Who would you, what position and what name would you add right now to the Broncos roster from this current crop of guys that probably aren't going to make the 53?
That's a great question. Who would you keep? Would it be a defensive lineman? I feel like that's kind of where we had our maybe biggest, our most difficult decision potentially. I don't know. Maybe I would keep Estime. I think I would say, you know what? I've got an extra spot. I'm not ready to give up on that yet. I'll keep Estime if it's an extra roster spot that the Broncos get.
Yeah, I debate between off-ball linebacker, running back certainly is a choice there. Maybe an additional tight end. I mean that's the kind of benefit and the luxury of the Broncos having really good depth right now. I'd probably add Jordan Turner to the 53 at the off-ball linebacker spot here if Crawshaw didn't count against the roster designation there. But there are obviously a bunch of names that could be practice squad candidates as well. We'll look at those a little bit further as the week goes on. The Broncos will report back for training camp on Tuesday here. We'll have post-practice coverage as well and setting you up for Saturday's preseason finale against the New Orleans Saints. It'll be a morning kickoff. We're excited to bring all the coverage for you here this week. Broncos Country, for all your Broncos news, content, coverage, analysis, and more. Make sure you become an everyday. If you're a brand new viewer or listener of the show, we appreciate you. Rock with us all season long because we got you covered here. Locked On Broncos. For your second listen, check out our friends over there at Locked On Fantasy Football for all the information you need going into your fantasy drafts here. Sayre Bedinger, myself, we'll be back tomorrow for a brand new episode of the show.